Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene, where empowered by love, we transform ourselves and serve our world. My name is Linda Krennicke and my pronouns are she and her. With me today is our minister, Rev. Jen Youngsun, collaborative pianist Suzanne Giordano, Interim Director of Faith Formation for Children and Youth, Sarah Sauter, and working behind the scenes, Technical Communications Coordinator, Kat Johnson. You may notice we're not in the sanctuary today. We're having some network issues, so we're all Zooming from home today. We gather and worship to find meaning and to live more deeply. Worship creates connections within, among, and beyond us, calling us to our better selves, calling us to live with wisdom and compassion. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your image of the holy, we're glad you're here. If you're visiting us today, we'd love to hear from you and invite you to fill out the visitor form as you feel called. The link is being dropped into the chat now.
Good Sunday morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Sauter, and I use the pronouns she and her.
And my name is Jen Youngsun, and I use the pronouns she and her.
So, Reverend Jen.
Yes, Sarah?
While doing some research for this part of the worship service, I came upon this awesome quote from Universalist Elbridge Gary Brooks. Our work as Universalists is not simply to sow seeds, but to cultivate harvests.
Oh, I like that.
I do too. I wonder if we could take a moment and look at that in the light of faith formation.
Okay, let's.
When we offer faith formation to our children, we're sowing seeds.
Yes, we are indeed.
Seeds of character and UU values that germinate within our children to fashion them into the best people they can become.
Yes, we are. And in the germination of those many seeds is our hope for the future of our faith.
Cultivating a harvest of a new generation of Unitarian Universalists working for a better world.
Not as human beings having a spiritual experience,
but as spiritual beings having a human experience.
Nice.
But wait, let's stay with the garden metaphor. What kind of seeds do we sow?
Well, first, the classic seeds of our UU values, character.
Seeds of religious literacy.
Yes, the world our children inherit from us is very different from the one we grew up in, so much more global.
True, very true. Our children will interact daily with people across the country and across the planet. They'll need to understand the faith foundations of our neighbors and how it affects their decision-making.
Well, what about the medium, the soil that our seeds grow in?
That will affect our harvest, won't it?
The quality of our medium is important.
And how often we water.
Yep.
And how we should fertilize.
Yeah. Let's dig a little deeper.
Ha ha ha, I see what you did there.
These are important questions.
They are indeed. We need a vision for our garden.
And for its harvest.
We need some plans, some knowledge.
And some care and some hope.
A vision of abundance for our faith formation garden.
A vision of the harvest it can produce.
So, how do we get there?
Well, we're going to need some people who want to dream with us about the future of faith at UUCE.
And which seeds to plant.
and what medium and fertilizer to use. And yes,
Just can't pull out our old school farmer's almanac, can we?
no, we can't. Our world has changed too much.
True. We need to plan this faith formation garden with a vision towards a changed world.
A better one?
If we are patient, careful, thoughtful,
And hopeful.
then yes, a better one.
We invite all parents, congregational leaders, and all others who care about the future of our faith.
Who care about our children, who will make a difference in our new world as our future Unitarian Universalists.
To come and dream with us at 2:00 today as we consider the future of faith formation with Annie Scott from the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association.
We hope to see you there. The Zoom is on the church calendar on the website, also in the weekly connections, and thirdly, it's being dropped into the chat just now.
The words for our chalice lighting are from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that.
Once upon a time, in a land far, far away called New Jersey, there was a person named Thomas Potter. Now, Thomas didn't believe that God would ever condemn people to eternal hell and damnation. He believed in a loving God that would accept everyone into heaven. He believed this so fervently that he built a chapel and patiently waited for God to send a preacher to spread this new and radical gospel. And so it happened that a ship carrying that very preacher had just run into a sandbar right off the shore. Thomas was thrilled. He welcomed the preacher, whose name was John Murray, and showed him his chapel and told him about his dream. Now, John shared Thomas's belief in universal salvation, but he shook his head and said, no, he was done with ministry. Both his wife and son had died. Someone had stolen all his possessions, and he was deep in debt. And now he was stuck in New Jersey. But John made a deal with Thomas, saying, if the winds didn't change direction by Sunday, he would stay and preach. Well, the winds did not change. The ship was still stuck. And so John Murray preached the first Universalist sermon in Potter's Chapel. That Sunday, many heard for the first time about a love so powerful that it could reconcile every person to God. The good news that no soul is forever separated from the unconditional love of God traveled throughout this land. As universalism grew and developed over the centuries, it changed. And yet it still speaks to us today. Come, let us take whatever has been handed to us by our Universalist ancestors. Come, let us worship together. I invite you now into a time of stillness, stillness of body, stillness of mind. Settle into this moment. This moment has never been and will never be again. The words of Lao Tzu guide us this morning. Do you imagine the universe is agitated? Go to the desert at night and look out at the stars. This practice should answer the question. If you've never seen stars like this, imagine the infinite sky in the infinite cosmos inside yourself. The enlightened one settles their mind as the universe settles the stars in the sky. By connecting their mind with the subtle origin, they calm it. Once calmed, it naturally expands, and ultimately their mind becomes as vast and immeasurable as the night sky. Amen.
Our reading today is from Lynn Unger, Salvation. By what are you saved? And how? Saved like a bit of string tucked away in a drawer? Saved like a child rushed from a burning building, already singed and coughing smoke? Or are you salvaged like a car part, the one good door when the rest is wrecked? Do you believe me when I say you are neither salvaged nor saved, but salved, anointed by gentle hands where you are most tender? Haven't you seen the way snow curls down like a fresh sheet, how it covers everything, makes everything beautiful without exception?
From Murray Grove, New Jersey, the good news of a loving God spread like a fertile seed. Here's a black and white photo of two people standing next to a very large billboard that says, Murray Grove, birthplace of the Universalist Church in America, September 30, 1770. The Universalist gospel, which means good news, took root in lots of small towns in the South and in the West and sparked the imagination of our religious ancestors. Olympia Brown was one of them. Raised a Universalist in Michigan, Olympia was frustrated by all the rules in her women's school. Young ladies are not allowed to stand in the doorway. Young ladies are not allowed to linger in the halls. And, oh, we never examine young ladies in algebra. In 1954, she was so fed up with those rules that she transferred to Antioch College in Ohio, where their first president, Horace Mann, was setting up a great experiment, co-equal education, and she wanted to be there for that. Olympia Brown would later become the first woman to be formally ordained by a Protestant denomination, the Universalist Church of America. Here's a photo showing the college in those days and portraits of both Olympia Brown and Horace Mann. Now, in that same year, 1854, another young adult in Ohio, Samantha Cornell, was preparing for a grand adventure. So here is a sepia-colored photo of Samantha. Her father was a mathematician and likely would have known about the Universalists in town. he had made the overland crossing from Ohio to the Willamette Valley, losing both his brother-in-law and cousin to that arduous trip. So when it came time to send for the rest of his family, he insisted that they take the water route through Panama. After arriving safely in Oregon, Samantha continued her education in this region, teaching at the school that would later become Willamette University. She was famous for delivering a paper published in the local newspaper protesting the fact that young children were made to sit for 6 hours a day in school. She wrote, "It is contrary to the universal instincts of the young to remain quiet for any length of time." When her family arrived in this valley, there had already been Universalists here, on and off, organized and not so organized. One of them had been a Baptist preacher from California named Edward McAllister. Edward and Samantha met, they married, and became leaders of the Universalist Church. So here is a copy of the Universalist Register. This is the 1874 newsletter that shows Samantha as vice president of the Oregon State Convention of Universalists. And subsequent records show that she was a licensed preacher and may have been the first female minister in the Northwest. Samantha and Edward traveled all over the state of Oregon, serving small, struggling Universalist churches and starting up new ones. And finally, after all that travel, they settled here in Eugene. The University of Oregon was brand new then, and they had 6 children that they needed to educate. So here, they settled and founded the first Universalist church in June of 1884. Records show that she was active in the temperance movement. But sadly, Samantha died just 12 years later. And soon after, it appears that the church also folded. She was just 56 years old. But the spirit of liberal religion and the free church continued with the Unitarians. The Unitarian Church was founded at 11th and Ferry Street, and of course, continues with us today. I want to thank Gil Osgood for his historic research. Gil has written the most detailed account of Reverend Samantha's ministry that we have. He and his writing partners, Kathleen and Ken and Evelyn and John, wrote the early history of our church and are helping to preserve the stories of our early ancestors. We call them the communion of saints, and we have a duty to carry forward their memory. At the same time, we can't know all that we want to know about them. I'm so curious about how they responded to the situation of their times, what a tumultuous time in which they lived. They were, of course, part of a system that granted land to settlers, land that was already being used and cared for by other people. They lived in a place that allowed the prominent rise of the KKK, and we just don't know how they responded. Here's a photo that was recently shared in a meeting by Fabio Andrade from Eugene's Human Rights Commission. It's a photo from right around the turn of the 20th century, the same time that we mark the beginning of our church's history. It's downtown Eugene. And you who have lived here longer than me will know exactly where this is, but it's a street view. And in the distance, you can see the huge letters KKK and a large white cross sitting prominently on top of a hill. This next photo is a quilt from the UU Church in Albuquerque. Two linked circles, one with the Unitarian chalice in the center, and then the other is the Universalist symbol, where the Christian cross is offset and sitting at the bottom left of the circle. Over these 250 years, the meaning of universalism has changed and adapted to our times, while still rooted in the idea that no one is outside the reach of God's love. Back in John Murray and Thomas Potter's day, most people believed that God could and would condemn you to an eternity of fire and brimstone, the worst possible suffering imaginable. So reimagining the nature of God as one who would never do that was heresy. Denying the existence of hell was denounced by many faith leaders as dangerous doctrine. After all, if there is no threat of hell, then what would compel any human to be good? And if God is too loving and too good to condemn sinners to eternal hell, then salvation through Christ's sacrifice and blood atonement becomes unnecessary. Well, they were right. It was a slippery slope, and we went there while the orthodoxy stayed on their course. Universalists kept preaching that God's great love will save even the most wicked among us. Now, I know there's a lot more to say about evil, but that's just going to have to wait for another Sunday. So without the worries of an afterlife, whether they've been predestined to go to heaven or hell, whether they would be part of the 144,000, without any of those worries, Universalists focus their spiritual attention on making life better here and now, to liberate the oppressed, to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to house the unsheltered. Because if there is no hell, and if everybody's going to be ultimately reunited with original love, then there is to be no division in the afterlife. And if there's no division in the afterlife, there should be no division right here on earth. Maybe that's why it was easier for the Universalists to support equal education and to ordain the first woman minister. In the years that followed World War II, some Universalists totally dropped the idea of God and joined with the humanist movement. Others held a vision for a global religion and a universal religion. At the Charles Street Meeting House in Boston, they created an experiment where they filled the sanctuary with art and music, books and scrolls from all the world's religions. Here's a photo of that space. So I've got two photos here. One is a picture of the space. On the floor, in the center of the room, is a map of the world, and the pews are arranged around it. On one of the walls is a huge painting of the Milky Way, and then displayed on both sides, various symbols of the world's religions. The other image that I'm showing is a close-up of some of those symbols. They're all made out of brass, and there were 65 in total. And so some of them were the Christian cross, the crescent moon of Islam, the Star of David, the Hindu lotus, the symbol of the Tao, and so on. It was a short-lived experiment, but its legacy lives on in our use of diverse sources of spiritual wisdom. Today, we're more mindful of misappropriating those rituals, prayers, songs, and we're still learning how to use them respectfully. Today, the Universalist legacy we hold and carry forward to the next generation calls us to be more inclusive and even more loving. Here is a beautiful, vibrant photo of UUCE people holding the bright yellow love banner. Someone will tell me where this picture is from and who's in those pictures. We find our salvation not in an otherworldly, supernatural God, but in God as love itself. Love, our divine capacity to engage in full-hearted living, creatively, compassionately, and collaboratively with this community of all beings, a community that includes the ones who have gone before, the ones right here, right now, and the ones who are about to enter our lives. May we rise to this call. May it be so. Amen.
We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted. We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid. We need one another in the hour of success when we look for someone to share our triumphs. All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us. That's from our hymnal, that Singing the Living Tradition by G.E. Odell.
With so much gratitude and a full heart, I thank each and every one of you for sharing your joys and your sorrows. And I know that some of them may be too fresh to share with others, and they remain in the silent sanctuaries of your hearts. O gracious and loving God, whom we call by many names, Spirit of life, O great love, we thank you for our very lives. We thank you for this community of loving souls. And we thank you for our ancestors. They were imperfect as we are, and they struggled mightily to do right and bring justice into the world. Today, we hear the grief of losing grandparents. We hear the joy of finding peace and beauty outdoors. Today, we hear the anxiety of those who are worried about the future. And we hear the great hope of people dreaming about a larger life for themselves and for their neighbors. O Spirit of life, receive all of our prayers with our thanks. Amen.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
And now, as you leave this sacred time, I send you forth with these words from John Murray. Go out into the highways and byways. Give the people something of your vision. You may possess a small light, but uncover it. Let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of everyone you meet. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Go in peace, my friends.